Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of The Outpost, a great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously, we're dealing with the aftermath of Season 3's finale, and they're giving, a funeral for Gwen. I mean, technically the only thing... I don't know. Was there even ashes technically left? I don't think so. So they don't really sadly, don't even have anything to really bury, do they? But obviously it was meant to also be a crowning, but Talon wants nothing to do with the crown because it's like, I'm not a queen, I'm not Gwen, because it's not, it's not like she just lost a friend or just a queen. It's like, no, she lost her best friend. Like, this is the first friend that she's made in a very long time. So, like... It's just it's a lot to handle because obviously she didn't want this for Gwen, but Gwen chose. I mean, that also being the thing too. Like, right, you guys knew her as Queen Rosamund, but she was always, I never called her that. She was always Gwen to me, But obviously, like, Garrett's kind of pushing for it because she has to be the one. I mean, everyone is kind of pushing for it. Janzo and even Zed of like she needs to take the crown because she's the only one. She's the one that can lead the Black Bloods and humans to like unity, I mean, especially considering like, well, for one, Black Bloods were like so, I mean, most of them are in the Plains of Ashes, and the ones that were here obviously got murdered, and she's like the only one that was left. So it's only befitting that like it's someone who has lived in the world of humans, who is a Black Blood, be the one that kind of ultimately unites everyone after they've been divided for so long, not just in the past, but even just over the course of this series of what we've seen of just how divided they've been and kind of at each other's throats. It's not just her that's in that somewhat similar position, but it's also Ren. Ren having like Zed being like, oh, you have to take over as the high priestess. It's like, your mother was the high priestess, so it's up to you, so she doesn't want that because it's like, I don't know what my mother knew. Like, I'm just me. I'm more of a scientist, not a mystic. But it's like both of them kind of denying the roles that have kind of been cast for them to an extent. And I mean, to be fair, it's like you'd never had too long to mourn because Felicity, in her own right, regardless, I do not agree with a lot of the things Felicity has said and did this episode. But I think it's because she was mourning in her own right, because it's also like, right, like, are there going to be any ceremonies for Tobin? And it's like, well, it didn't feel right doing those customs after like we have to like basically have a funeral for our queen. It's like, we will get to Tobin, like, he did matter, so don't get it wrong, like, he did matter to everyone, but it doesn't change the, it's just, I mean, to be fair, it's a lot of death. A lot of death happened, it's like, and the same moment they lost Gwen, they also lost, well, a little bit before, like, Talon lost her father after finding him again after so long. They, even Ren lost her mother, because that's a whole thing too, like, Talon ends up, spreading her father's ashes, and it's like, your father was selfless, and Ren had to tell Talon that because it's like, right, my dad wasn't much of a father because he wasn't there, but it's like, right, he lived in a cave, like, stayed away from everyone to protect, people, so he was selfless. He gave up what he wanted to be back with you, living with you and your mom and your brother, but he had to stay away if it meant protecting all of you from him. And the same thing, and obviously, like, Talon saying this, I'm sorry for you losing your mom. And it's like, she's like, well, my mom wasn't much of a mom. It's like, regardless of anything, it still sucks to lose your mom. Because it's like, because I'm sure that makes you feel a little conflicted because it's like, right, my mom was lost a long time ago, but it still doesn't change the fact of like, right, that was your mom. And it is a situation of, regardless of her actions, you went through a lot to save her regardless, but then ultimately you're kind of like, right, my mom's beyond saving, but it doesn't make it any less hurtful that you lost your mom. I mean, look at Janzo and Munt. Their mom wasn't the best person, but it's, I mean, I guess you can make the argument like Eleanor had a lot more redeeming qualities than Yavala in that regard, but still, like, she had her shady side of, and it didn't make their loss of hers any worse, I also love that Ren ends up being pregnant. I figured as much the moment, like, Janzo points out her ears, and she's like, what? And it's like, she did, like, the way she was acting, especially when she was looking in the mirror, and it's like, oh my god, I was like, oh, that reaction, I'm like, you're pregnant, aren't you? And Zed just like, whoa, you're pregnant. She's like, why don't you just shout it at everyone? It's like, I haven't even told Janzo yet. Wait, Janzo's the father? Never knew the little guy had it in him. And it's like, but also it's like, why aren't you telling him? Because I guess it's like, she doesn't know how, because she's like, maybe Janzo probably doesn't want to be a father, so it's like, she's trying to process it. A lot is happening all at once for everyone, so it's probably a thing of like, she's also got this high priestess thing because people are bowing to her, and she's like, no, I don't want anything to do with it, but, you know, people already, like, you know, it's like, although the Black Bloods are like, no, you have to be the one. Everyone's already looking at her looking towards her as a leader. Same thing for Talon. So no matter how much either one of them denies it, these respective positions, like I said, these respective roles are being, you know, thrust upon them to a certain extent. Whereas you have Felista kind of jumping at the opportunity to be queen, and that's why I was like, like I said, I wonder if that was just her lashing out just because of everything with Tobin, but. Like, the fact, because later on she throws shade towards Rosman. It's like, oh, she was weak, and it's like, oh, she basically wouldn't be dead if she was more courageous or whatever, and taking the red kinge when I offered it. And it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? And Garrett had to set that straight. Like, Gwen's sacrifice made sure all of us survived, including you. Don't get that twisted. I think it's also, like, on a level of, like, right, like, Tobin's death and everything, and... I mean, because there was also the part of, like, right, because I'm sure you're also a time, like, yeah, he chose you and everything, but there's still a part that's like, there was always still that little thing of, like, Tobin and Rosman, so I think there's always going to be that little resentment in that regard. Because initially she's like, oh, I have claim to the throne because I have royal blood in me, not as much as Gwen, as Rosman, but then as Janzo is, you know, doing the genealogy thing. And I thought it was so interesting because, like, I had actually paused it when he was like, wait. I was like, when he was like, so her father's uncle's cousin. It's like, isn't that just another way of saying her grandfather's cousin? I was like, wait, what? I was like, okay, actually, yeah, that tracks. I at first, and it is like all the whole thing of like, right, but it depends if that her father's brother or like her father's mother's brother, you know. So it's like, yeah, it's like that's a whole interesting thing. It's like, because like I said, I had to pause and think about it. It's like, all right, that all tracks, but it turns out she's actually got more royal blood in her than she thought. Like, she thought she was a little lower on the totem pole of blood of the royal bloodline. It's actually she's a little higher. I also think it's interesting that they're kind of setting up, like, at least Janzo and Ren are kind of being like, maybe there should be another government. Like, maybe we should find it, like, it shouldn't just be like, oh, what bloodline you're from, because you being from a bloodline doesn't necessarily mean that you're fit to be a leader. But, it all stems from, like, right, your bloodline was chosen by the gods type of thing. That's supposed to be what that, what that kind of stems from. But... Ren has her own selfish reasons for being like, yeah, let's break tradition so I don't have to be the high priestess. But, yeah, it seems like they're trying to set up kind of almost like not necessarily a democracy, but like probably like probably like a council of representatives, probably something like that form of government. You had, like, the three running things their way, which obviously that's not a way to run. And it's, once again, it shouldn't all be dictated by a bloodline, because that doesn't, because Felicia's shown that, like I said, the thing is, too, last season, she showed that she can be selfish as well, like, if it comes to getting what she wants. So it's not like she doesn't have this selflessness in some regards. She does in others. Like, she has shown that she can be selfless, but I think just in her being driven by grief that she's let a lot of stuff kind of get to her. Like, she's very arrogant in this, episode in that regard. Once again, talking all that smack about, like, oh, I won't lead as weakly as, like, because, like, Rosman had, ruled with a weak fist. It's like, I'll rule with an iron fist. But it's like, no, like, you can't, like... do that. Like, people won't respect you, they'll fear you, and that's, but, it's like, oh, they'll eventually come to love me, but it's like, they will never love you as much as Rosman, because they respected her, they didn't just fear her. Like, ruling through fear gets you nothing, but just, that's how people eventually go to the point, like, what, that people decide to assassinate kings and queens. Like, it's just like, oh, we're afraid of you, so we'd rather take you out. Like, that's how you create those circumstances. That's how you create resentment amongst your subjects. I mean, especially considering, like, she kind of runs a little rampant with the Red Kinch. To be fair, it's shown that she has more control over it at the very least, because it's not, it's not just like everyone with a Kinch. Even Garrett wasn't affected, so it's like she pointed it towards the people that were brawling and fighting. So, I mean, there's at least showing that she has control in certain regards. I think that's just the irony, because it feels like she's spiraling and losing control in other regards, which is ultimately ironic again, considering she ends up with control at the end of the day. But it's like, the fact is that she sides with 2 and 3. Like, that's like, why would you do that? Like, you know how the Prime Orders run things, but I guess it's like, it makes her come off a little power hungry. But it's like, right, to get whatever she wants, she'll do whatever it takes. Like, she needs to bring Tobin back, but it's like, oh, he's been dead for a long time, so it won't just take one. You need 20 people to bring him back this time. And ultimately, she sacrifices 20 people, try to justify by being like, you guys would sacrifice yourself for Lord Tobin, right? And it's like, of course, like, if we could, we would give our life for him. It's like, well, I thank you for your service and your sacrifice. It's like, yeah, like, she even said it early in the episode, Tobin wouldn't want that, if it meant, like, sacrificing so many people just to bring me back. I'm not where, I just didn't expect that. I was like, but I mean, there's also the thing of, like, right, they had his body there and everything, but that doesn't mean anything. I thought this could have been, like, our last time seeing him or something. But it's like, no, I didn't expect the whole resurrection storyline, so. Just her, once again, it's just Felista not willing to let go of what she wants. And it's like, no, Tobin is what she wants. And it's like, I'm not letting him go, and I still want the crown. Talon, like I said, kept being reluctant to take it because she didn't want it. She didn't think she deserved it. She's like, I don't even look like a queen. And Jen's being like, oh, you're a new queen. But she also getting drunk, even to the point, like, betting a game with Zed about, hey, if I lose, I will open the portal and let more Black Bloods through. But it's like, if I win, you answer whatever I can to essentially the best of his ability. But I'm like, even Garrett's like, that's not something you should be betting on. Like, that's so foolish to even use that as like a bargaining chip in a bet. Like, don't do that. Like, that's not something to be trifled with. But once again, she's not in the best mindset. Like, you're losing your best friend and then having your best friend's job thrust upon you and you don't want it, because it's just a constant reminder of, like, right, but I'm not Gwen, I'm not Rosamund, I can't lead. Like, she had the people's love, but it's like, yeah, but you have the people's trust as well, and they will love you because all that you've done. And that's what Ren had a reminder too. It's like, you're just as selfless as your dad and Gwen, because all that you've sacrificed, all that you've ever done to save people time and time again, it shows that you are the right person for the job. How she's even getting attacked later on. I'm like, oh, it is interesting that this mysterious assassin shows up and tries to kill her. Even I was like, oh, it's still impressive that she's holding her own even though she's drunk. It's like, well, not holding her own as well as she should. But then we end up finding out who it is. She's Ilya's sister, which I'm like, we didn't know well, for one, did they ever mention that the Dragman, like, was a whole position? I thought it was like a one-person thing. I didn't know, like, people could train to be... I guess it still fits, but it's like, I didn't know, like, oh, there's a whole monastery dedicated to people training to become the next Dragman. So I'm like, now that her sister's going, like, is she technically supposed to be, like, the next Dragman? I mean, is a Dragman really even necessary anymore? Like, so I'm just like... I'm guessing she's going to be sticking around this season. Like, maybe she's going to pop in and pop out. I don't know. But, she heard that, like, a Black Blood warrior was responsible for killing her sister, but it's like, no, it was Reb. Don't worry, Reb's dead. It's like, that revenge was mine. It's like, I wasn't going to let her get away having killed your sister. She was a friend. But also, like, I had my reasons for killing her, so you don't owe me anything. It's like, yeah, well, call it even for me almost, I'll owe you a debt, for repaying you for my revenge, for almost killing you. She's like, you didn't almost kill me. She's like, yeah, I did, to be, but that's also the thing, like, right, you weren't at your best at the time, so, once again, I still think it is a thing of, like, yeah, you might have almost killed her, but you didn't, and she was drunk. I think that speaks volumes. It's like, because even when Talon wins this time, it's like, right, I beat you. Like, last time I was drunk, I'm sober now, like, there's no way you're going to beat me, even with your skills, so, interesting developments on that front, and I'm kind of, jumping around it, but there is also the main thing of the white and black Kinge waking up, whatever those things are, like these gods, as like 2 and 3 kind of referred to them as. So, and the moment they talk, they're like, right, the others haven't awakened. So then I'm like, okay, so, and they start, when everyone throughout the episode is using their Kinges, with the exception of Zed, because he hasn't used his yet, the gods speak to each one of them. In particular, they refer to the one that's in Talon as Betrayer. So the thing is, I'm assuming is, maybe the Kinges themselves are the souls of those creatures, in the sense that, like, when they're talking, because it's like, it's not like they're talking to the host, they're talking to the respective Kinges. So I think they represent the soul. So the soul of, like, the Kinge that Talon has is a betrayer. I guess he turned against them, and maybe he's the reason why the rest of them were sealed away. I'm curious, like, how that whole thing will work. It's still, like, there's still a lot to that history we still don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of people. I mean, as a high priestess, I guess, like, Yavala would know a lot more about that. And, like, for Ren, like, she doesn't know much about it. Like, all her mom's stuff, because the only thing they have black blood related is all the stuff that the blacksmith / the wolf, like, all that he had, that's all that the human world has about black bloods. But they'd have to go get a lot of Yavala's books from the Plains of Ashes if they wanted any answers. But also that would involve bringing over, like, all the other black bloods, including, like, the Blackfist. And it's like, right, Jonzo's like, I'm not really too keen on last time they showed up, what that meant, and it's like, I'd rather not go through that again, so We'll see kind of what happens in that regard, but it is. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking each one of the Kinges represents one. So I would assume in totality there are 7 of those creatures, those gods. Like, so who they are, what their connection. I mean, is there a connection to them and the black? Like, do the black bloods stem from them in some shape or form? I mean, I'm assuming it would also have to deal with the Lakiri as well, because all of a sudden it's like, right, the Lakiri are just like doing their own thing. Is like, what's that about? Because even Talon being like, do the Lakiri have like a mating season? And Ren's like, not that I'm aware of, but it's like, oh, that's kind of a thought to think about. But it's like the Lakiri are just off on their own, doing their own thing. So I'm assuming, like, they have more sway over the Lakiri than, like, the Black Bloods do, which I think is interesting. So maybe it's like, because if I remember correctly, they've talked about, like, the Lakiri's ancestor and that ancestor's connection to the Black Bloods and stuff. Like, that stuff's gotten covered before, so I'd assume, like, whatever these things are, they're, like, related to the Lakiri, or it's maybe the Black Bloods. I don't know. It's something, I know they've talked about that stuff before, but I'm blanking on it right now. But once again, I would, because a lot of stuff about that also crosses my mind of, like, so the Black Kinge and the White Kinge immediately went back to what I'm, like I said, I'm assuming are, like, the original vessels. Like, those souls that are the Kinge went back to their respective bodies. But I'm like, why didn't the Red Kinge do that? I mean, because, like, obviously it bounced from one person to the next until, like, it took a little while before it went to Felista. So that's why I'm like, why didn't it immediately do that? Or is it because of the special, like, situation with the White Kinge and the Black Kinge, and, like, both Yavala and Gwen's bodies getting destroyed, that led to, like, their respective Kinges doing what they did? Or, because the Red Kinge was out of a body long enough for that to matter. The others, it makes sense. Like, obviously, Zed had to go get his, like, and, like, Talon's had hers for years, so it makes sense in that regard. Same thing for, like, 2 and 3, they've kept theirs for a while, so theirs aren't, like, running amok, out there. But it's like, why didn't the Red Kinge immediately find its host? Like, That's what I'm wondering. Like, because obviously its body must still be out there. It's not like it doesn't have a body, because like they talk to Philista when she activated her kin. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see in that regard. But obviously Philista is serving with the as one of the three, which is kind of bad considering she's going to be one of the three while also being the queen, and that kind of legitimizes, well, the other two, because before it's just kind of like they had no, like they ran through tyranny, so like no one would like question them. Now it's like, right, we're in a position where we have one of us on the throne, and so that legitimizes their power, especially it's like, oh, we're going to be her advisors and stuff like that. So it's like, right. So I don't know whether Tobin coming back, whether he kind of got controlled, or whether it's just kind of like a, right, she is rightfully the queen, so he kind of has to obey her orders. But it's not like Tobin looked like he was all excited about it. It's like, no, I got resurrected for this, knowing that 20 men died for my sake. Now knowing like, wait, Rosmund's dead, Philista's queen, wait, you're part of the three. Like, it's just everything probably hitting you at once. But I feel like it was like a reluctancy thing. It didn't seem like he was all about it. And obviously Talon's looking at Philista of like, right, like, what are you thinking? Like, this is a terrible, terrible, terrible decision on your part. So everything hit the fan all at once. I figured, like, even when Talon was like, fine, I'll take the crown, it's like, sadly, she waited too long. So if she had taking the time, because the whole point was like, right, if they had jumped on this quicker, then like Philista's claim to the throne would have just been like seen as traitorous at the very least, like, you know, because the people wanted her, wanted Talon, but now it's like, right, now with Tobin to legitimize her claim even more, and it's just like, once again, ruling through fear, but she's going to learn the hard way. Ruling isn't what she thought it was. Especially with all these like, extenuating circumstances. Once again, you've already put yourself in a position where there's going to be a group of people, Janzo, Talon, and even Garrett, probably a lot of the Black Bloods, who are not going to be too happy about you running things. Like that being like Ren and Zed in particular. But especially with all this stuff of like these potential gods as they're kind of being revered as have returned, like what that all means. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what goes out in the season. I don't know if there's even an official trailer out. I know there might be for this season, even if it's a short one. I haven't seen anything. So I'm going into the season knowing nothing. And I'm fine with that. Like, you know, at this, you know, there was no point to look up a trailer. So I'm fine going into this season completely blind, having no idea, haven't read anything, haven't seen anything. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see where this season ultimately ends up taking us. Where the next episode ends up taking us in general. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.